Father Goriot, Honor de Balzac. The Project Gutenberg e-book of Father Goriot, by Honor de Balzac. This e-book is for the use of anyone anywhere at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this e-book or online at www.gutenberg.net. Title: Father Goriot. Author: Honor de Balzac. Release date: October 6, 2004. Ebook 1237. Language: English. Character set encoding: ASCII. Start of this Project Gutenberg ebook. Father Goriot. Produced by Dagny. Father Goriot. By Honor de Balzac. Translated by Alan Marriage. But you have chosen already. You have gone to see your cousin of Boston, and you have had an inkling of luxury. You have been to meet dear Stud's house, and in Father Goriot's daughter you have seen a glimpse of the Parisienne for the first time. That day you came back with a word written on your forehead. I knew it, I could read it: success. Yes, success at any price. Bravo, said I to myself, here is the sort of fellow for me. You wanted money. Where was it all to come from? You have drained your sister's little hoard. All brothers sponge more or less on their sisters. Those 1,500 francs of yours, got together, God knows how, in a country where there are more chestnuts than 5-franc pieces, will slip away like soldiers after pillage. And then, what will you do? Shall you begin to work? Work, or what you understand by work at this moment means, for a man of Poiret's caliber, an old age in Mama Walker's lodging house. There are 50,000 young men in your position at this moment, all bent as you are on solving one and the same problem: how to acquire a fortune rapidly. You are but a unit in that aggregate. You can guess, therefore, what efforts you must make, how desperate the struggle is. There are not 50,000 good positions for you. You must fight and devour one another like spiders in a pot. Do you know how a man makes his way here? By brilliant genius or by skillful corruption. You must either cut your way through these masses of men like a cannonball, or steal among them like a plague. Honesty is nothing to the purpose. Men bow before the power of genius. They hate it, and try to slander it, because genius does not divide the spoil. But if genius persists, they bow before it. To sum it all up in a phrase, if they fail to smother genius in the mud, they fall on their knees and worship it. Corruption is a great power in the world, and talent is scarce. So corruption is the weapon of superfluous mediocrity. You will be made to feel the point of it everywhere. You will see women who spend more than 10,000 francs a year on dress, while their husband's salary, his whole income, is 6,000 francs. You will see officials buying estates on 12,000 francs a year. You will see women who sell themselves body and soul to drive in a carriage belonging to the son of a peer of France, who has a right to drive in the middle rank at Longchamp. You have seen that poor simpleton of a Goriot obliged to meet a bill with his daughter's name at the back of it, though her husband has 50,000 francs a year. I defy you to walk a couple of yards anywhere in Paris without stumbling on some infernal complication. I'll bet my head to a head of that salad that you will stir up a hornet's nest by taking a fancy to the first young, rich, and pretty woman you meet. They are all dodging the law, all at loggerheads with their husbands. If I were to begin to tell you all that vanity or necessity, virtue is not often mixed up in it, you may be sure all that vanity and necessity drive them to do for lovers, finery, housekeeping, or children, I should never come to an end. So an honest man is the common enemy. But do you know what an honest man is? Here, in Paris, an honest man is the man who keeps his own counsel, and will not divide the plunder. I am not speaking now of those poor bond slaves who do the work of the world without a reward for their toil. God Almighty's outcasts, I call them. Among them, I grant you, is virtue in all the flower of its stupidity, but poverty is no less their portion. At this moment, I think I see the long faces those good folk would pull if God played a practical joke on them and stayed away at the last judgment. Well, then, if you mean to make a fortune quickly, you must either be rich to begin with, or make people believe that you are rich. It is no use playing here except for high stakes. Once take to low play, it is all up with you. If in the scores of professions that are open to you, there are 10 men who rise very rapidly, people are sure to call them thieves. You can draw your own conclusions. Such is life. It is no cleaner than a kitchen. It reeks like a kitchen. And if you mean to cook your dinner, you must expect to soil your hands. The real art is in getting them clean again, and therein lies the whole morality of our epoch. If I take this tone in speaking of the world to you, I have the right to do so. I know it well. Do you think that I am blaming it? Far from it. The world has always been as it is now. Moralists' strictures will never change it. Mankind are not perfect, but one age is more or less hypocritical than another, and then simpletons say that its morality is high or low. I do not think that the rich are any worse than the poor. Man is much the same, high or low, or wherever he is. In a million of these human cattle there may be half a score of bold spirits who rise above the rest, above the laws. I am one of them. And you, if you are cleverer than your fellows, make straight to your end, and hold your head high. But you must lay your account with envy and slander and mediocrity, and every man's hand will be against you. Napoleon met with a minister of war, Aubry by name, who all but sent him to the colonies. Feel your pulse. Think whether you can get up morning after morning, strengthened in yesterday's purpose. In that case I will make you an offer that no one would decline. Listen attentively. You see, I have an idea of my own. My idea is to live a patriarchal life on a vast estate, say 100,000 acres, somewhere in the southern states of America. I mean to be a planter, to have slaves, to make a few snug millions by selling my cattle, timber, and tobacco. I want to live an absolute monarch, and to do just as I please. To lead such a life as no one here in these squalid dens of lath and plaster ever imagines. I am a great poet. I do not write my poems, I feel them, and act them. At this moment I have 50,000 francs, which might possibly buy 40 Negroes. I want 200,000 francs, because I want to have 200 Negroes to carry out my notions of the patriarchal life properly. Negroes, you see, are like a sort of family ready grown, and there are no inquisitive public prosecutors out there to interfere with you. That investment in ebony ought to mean 3 or 4 million francs in 10 years' time. If I am successful, no one will ask me who I am. I shall be Mr. 4 millions, an American citizen. I shall be 50 years old by then, and sound and hearty still. I shall enjoy life after my own fashion. In 2 words, if I find you an heiress with 1 million, will you give me 200,000 francs? 20% commission, eh? Is that too much? Your little wife will be very much in love with you. Once married, you will show signs of uneasiness and remorse. For a couple of weeks you will be depressed. Then, some night after sundry grimacings, comes the confession, between 2 kisses, 200,000 francs of debts, my darling. This sort of farce is played every day in Paris, and by young men of the highest fashion. When a young wife has given her heart, she will not refuse her purse. Perhaps you are thinking that you will lose the money for good. Not you. You will make 200,000 francs again by some stroke of business. With your capital and your brains you should be able to accumulate as large a fortune as you could wish. Ergo, in 6 months you will have made your own fortune, and our old friend Vautrin's, and made an amiable woman very happy, to say nothing of your people at home, who must blow on their fingers to warm them, in the winter, for lack of firewood. You need not be surprised at my proposal, nor at the demand I make. 47 out of every 60 great matches here in Paris are made after just such a bargain as this. The Chamber of Notaries compels my gentleman to. What must I do? Said Rastignac, eagerly interrupting Vautrin's speech. Next to nothing, returned the other, with a slight involuntary movement, the suppressed exultation of the angler when he feels a bite at the end of his line. Follow me carefully. The heart of a girl whose life is wretched and unhappy is a sponge that will thirstily absorb love. A dry sponge that swells at the first drop of sentiment. If you pay court to a young girl whose existence is a compound of loneliness, despair, and poverty, and who has no suspicion that she will come into a fortune, good Lord, it is quint and quatorze at piquet. It is knowing the numbers of the lottery beforehand. It is speculating in the funds when you have news from a sure source. It is building up a marriage on an indestructible foundation. The girl may come in for millions, and she will fling them, as if they were so many pebbles, at your feet. Take it, my beloved. Take it, Alfred, Adolphe, Eugene, or whoever it was that showed his sense by sacrificing himself for her. And as for sacrificing himself, this is how I understand it. You sell a coat that is getting shabby, so that you can take her to the Cadran Bleu, treat her to mushrooms on toast, and then go to the Ambigu Comique in the evening. You pawn your watch to buy her a shawl. I need not remind you of the fiddle-faddle sentimentality that goes down so well with all women. You spill a few drops of water on your stationery, for instance. Those are the tears you shed while far away from her. You look to me as if you were perfectly acquainted with the argot of the heart. Paris, you see, is like a forest in the New World, where you have to deal with a score of varieties of savages, Illinois and Hurons, who live on the proceed of their social hunting. You are a hunter of millions. You set your snares. You use lures and nets. There are many ways of hunting. Some hunt heiresses, others a legacy. Some fish for souls, yet others sell their clients, bound hand and foot. Everyone who comes back from the chase with his game bag well filled meets with a warm welcome in good society. In justice to this hospitable part of the world, it must be said that you have to do with the most easy and good-natured of great cities. If the proud aristocracies of the rest of Europe refuse admittance among their ranks to a disreputable millionaire, Paris stretches out a hand to him, goes to his banquets, eats his dinners, and hobnobs with his infamy. But where is such a girl to be found? Asked Eugene. Under your eyes. She is yours already. Bull. Vittorini. Precisely. And what was that you said? She is in love with you already, your little bear di Rastignac. She has not a penny, Eugene continued, much mystified. Oh, now we are coming to it. Just another word or two, and it will all be clear enough. Her father, Taillefer, is an old scoundrel. It is said that he murdered one of his friends at the time of the revolution. He is one of your comedians that sets up to have opinions of his own. He is a banker, senior partner in the house of Frederick Taillefer and Company. He has one son, and means to leave all he has to the boy, to the prejudice of Vittorini. For my part, I don't like to see injustice of this sort. I am like Don Quixote, I have a fancy for defending the weak against the strong. If it should please God to take that youth away from him, Taillefer would have only his daughter left. He would want to leave his money to someone or other. An absurd notion, but it is only human nature, and he is not likely to have any more children, as I know. Vittorini is gentle and amiable. She will soon twist her father round her fingers, and set his head spinning like a German top by plying him with sentiment. She will be too much touched by your devotion to forget you. You will marry her. I mean to play Providence for you, and Providence is to do my will. I have a friend whom I have attached closely to myself, a colonel in the army of the Loire, who has just been transferred into the Garde Royale. He has taken my advice and turned ultra-royalist. He is not one of those fools who never change their opinions. Of all pieces of advice, my cherub, I would give you this: don't stick to your opinions any more than to your words. If anyone asks you for them, let him have them, at a price. A man who prides himself on going in a straight line through life is an idiot who believes in infallibility. There are no such things as principles. There are only events, and there are no laws but those of expediency. A man of talent accepts events and the circumstances in which he finds himself, and turns everything to his own ends. If laws and principles were fixed and invariable, nations would not change them as readily as we change our shirts. The individual is not obliged to be more particular than the nation. A man whose services to France have been of the very slightest is a fitted looked on with superstitious awe because he has always seen everything in red. But he is good, at the most, to be put into the Museum of Arts and Crafts among the automatic machines and labeled Lafayette. While the prince at whom everybody flings a stone, the man who despises humanity so much that he spits as many oaths as he is asked for in the face of humanity, saved France from being torn in pieces at the Congress of Vienna. And they who should have given him laurels fling mud at him. Oh, I know something of affairs, I can tell you. I have the secrets of many men. Enough. When I find three minds in agreement as to the application of a principle, I shall have a fixed and immovable opinion. I shall have to wait a long while first. In the tribunals you will not find three judges of the same opinion on a single point of law. To return to the man I was telling you of. He would crucify Jesus Christ again, if I bade him. At a word from his old chum Vautrin he will pick a quarrel with a scamp that will not send so much as 5 francs to his sister, poor girl, and here Vautrin rose to his feet and stood like a fencing master about to lunge. Turn him off into the dark, he added. How frightful, said Eugene. You do not really mean it. Vautrin, you are joking. There, keep cool, said the other. Don't behave like a baby. But if you find any amusement in it, be indignant, flare up. Say that I am a scoundrel, a rascal, a rogue, a bandit. But do not call me a blackleg nor a spy. There, out with it, fire away. I forgive you. It is quite natural at your age. I was like that myself once. Only remember this, you will do worse things yourself someday. You will flirt with some pretty woman and take her money. You have thought of that, of course, said Vautrin, for how are you to succeed unless love is laid under contribution? There are no two ways about virtue, my dear student. It either is or it is not. Talk of doing penance for your sins. It is a nice system of business when you pay for your crime by an act of contrition. You seduce a woman that you may set your foot on such and such a rung of the social ladder. You sow dissension among the children of a family. You descend, in short, to every base action that can be committed at home or abroad, to gain your own ends for your own pleasure or your profit. And can you imagine that these are acts of faith, hope, or charity? How is it that a dandy, who in a night has robbed a boy of half his fortune, gets only a couple of months in prison, while a poor devil who steals a banknote for 1,000 francs, with aggravating circumstances, is condemned to penal servitude? Those are your laws. Not a single provision but lands you in some absurdity. That man with yellow gloves and a golden tongue commits many a murder. He sheds no blood, but he drains his victim's veins as surely. A desperado forces open a door with a crowbar, dark deeds both of them. You yourself will do every one of those things that I suggest to you today, bar the bloodshed. Do you believe that there is any absolute standard in this world? Despise mankind and find out the meshes that you can slip through in the net of the code. The secret of a great success for which you are at a loss to account is a crime that has never been found out, because it was properly executed. Silence, sir. I will not hear any more. You make me doubt myself. At this moment my sentiments are all my science. Just as you please, my fine fellow. I did think you were so weak-minded, said Vautrin. I shall say no more about it. One last word, however, and he looked hard at the student. You have my secret, he said. A young man who refuses your offer knows that he must forget it. Quite right, quite right. I am glad to hear you say so. Somebody else might not be so scrupulous, you see. Keep in mind what I want to do for you. I will give you a fortnight. The offer is still open. What a head of iron the man has, said Eugene to himself, as he watched Vautrin walk unconcernedly away with his cane under his arm. Yet me, de Beaucent said as much more gracefully. He has only stated the case in cruder language. He would tear my heart with claws of steel. What made me think of going to meet de Nucingen? He guessed my motives before I knew them myself. To sum it up, that outlaw has told me more about virtue than all I have learned from men and books. If virtue admits of no compromises, I have certainly robbed my sisters, he said, throwing down the bags on the table. He sat down again and fell, unconscious of his surroundings, into deep thought. To be faithful to an ideal of virtue, a heroic martyrdom. Pshaw. Everyone believes in virtue, but who is virtuous? Nations have made an idol of liberty, but what nation on the face of the earth is free? My youth is still like a blue and cloudless sky. If I set myself to obtain wealth or power, does it mean that I must make up my mind to lie, and fawn, and cringe, and swagger, and flatter, and dissemble? To consent to be the servant of others who have likewise fawned, and lied, and flattered? Must I cringe to them before I can hope to be their accomplice? Well, then, I decline. I mean to work nobly and with a single heart. I will work day and night. I will owe my fortune to nothing but my own exertions. It may be the slowest of all roads to success, but I shall lay my head on the pillow at night untroubled by evil thoughts. Is there a greater thing than this, to look back over your life and know that it is stainless as a lily? I and my life are like a young man and his betrothed. Vautrin has put before me all that comes after 10 years of marriage. The devil. My head is swimming. I do not want to think at all. The heart is a sure guide. Eugene was roused from his musings by the voice of the stout Sylvie, who announced that the tailor had come, and Eugene therefore made his appearance before the man with the 2 money bags, and was not ill pleased that it should be so. When he had tried on his dress suit, he put on his new morning costume, which completely metamorphosed him. I am quite equal to M.D. Trails, he said to himself. In short, I look like a gentleman. You asked me, sir, if I knew the houses where me.de Nucingen goes. Father Goriot's voice spoke from the doorway of Eugene's room. Yes. Very well then, she is going to the Maréchal Carigliano's ball on Monday. If you can manage to be there, I shall hear from you whether my 2 girls enjoyed themselves, and how they were dressed, and all about it in fact. How did you find that out, my good Goriot? Said Eugene, putting a chair by the fire for his visitor. Her maid told me. I hear all about their doings from Therese and Constance, he added gleefully. The old man looked like a lover who is still young enough to be made happy by the discovery of some little stratagem which brings him information of his lady love without her knowledge. You will see them both, he said, giving artless expression to a pang of jealousy. I do not know, answered Eugene. I will go to me.de Beaucent and ask her for an introduction to the Maréchal. Eugene felt a thrill of pleasure at the thought of appearing before the Vicomtesse, dressed as henceforward he always meant to be. The abysses of the human heart, in the moralist's phrase, are only insidious thoughts, involuntary promptings of personal interest. The instinct of enjoyment turns the scale. Those rapid changes of purpose which have furnished the text for so much rhetoric are calculations prompted by the hope of pleasure. Rastignac, beholding himself well dressed and impeccable as to gloves and boots, forgot his virtuous resolutions. Youth, moreover, when bent upon wrongdoing, does not dare to behold himself in the mirror of consciousness. Mature age has seen itself. And therein lies the whole difference between these two phases of life. A friendship between Eugene and his neighbor, Father Goriot, had been growing up for several days past. This secret friendship and the antipathy that the student had begun to entertain for Vautrin arose from the same psychological causes. The bold philosopher who shall investigate the effects of mental action upon the physical world will doubtless find more than one proof of the material nature of our sentiments in other animals. What physiognomist is as quick to discern character as a dog is to discover from a stranger's face whether this is a friend or no? Those bywords, atoms, affinities are facts surviving in modern languages for the confusion of philosophic wiseacres who amuse themselves by winnowing the chaff of language to find its grammatical roots. We feel that we are loved. Our sentiments make themselves felt in everything, even at a great distance. A letter is a living soul, and so faithful an echo of the voice that speaks in it, that finer natures look upon a letter as one of love's most precious treasures. Father Goriot's affection was of the instinctive order, a canine affection raised to a sublime pitch. He had scented compassion in the air, and the kindly respect and youthful sympathy in the student's heart. This friendship had, however, scarcely reached the stage at which confidences are made. Though Eugene had spoken of his wish to meet me, de Nucingen, it was not because he counted on the old man to introduce him to her house, for he hoped that his own audacity might stand him in good stead. All that Father Goriot had said as yet about his daughters had referred to the remarks that the student had made so freely in public on that day of the two visits. How could you think that me, dear Stod, bore you a grudge for mentioning my name? He had said on the day following that scene at dinner. My daughters are very fond of me. I am a happy father. But my sons-in-law have behaved badly to me, and rather than make trouble between my darlings and their husbands, I choose to see my daughters secretly. Fathers who can see their daughters at any time have no idea of all the pleasure that all this mystery gives me. I cannot always see mine when I wish, do you understand? So when it is fine I walk out in the Champs-Élysées after finding out from their waiting maids whether my daughters mean to go out. I wait near the entrance. My heart beats fast when the carriages begin to come. I admire them in their dresses, and as they pass they give me a little smile, and it seems as if everything was lighted up for me by a ray of bright sunlight. I wait, for they always go back the same way, and then I see them again. The fresh air has done them good and brought color into their cheeks. All about me people say, what a beautiful woman that is. And it does my heart good to hear them. Are they not my own flesh and blood? I love the very horses that draw them. I envy the little lapdog on their knees. Their happiness is my life. Everyone loves after his own fashion, and mine does no one any harm. Why should people trouble their heads about me? I am happy in my own way. Is there any law against going to see my girls in the evening when they are going out to a ball? And what a disappointment it is when I get there too late, and am told that Madam has gone out. Once I waited till 3 o'clock in the morning for Nassie. I had not seen her for 2 whole days. I was so pleased, that it was almost too much for me. Please do not speak of me unless it is to say how good my daughters are to me. They are always wanting to heap presents upon me, but I will not have it. Just keep your money, I tell them. What should I do with it? I want nothing. And what am I, sir, after all? An old carcase, whose soul is always where my daughters are. When you have seen me, de Nucingen, tell me which you like the most, said the old man after a moment's pause, while Eugene put the last touches to his toilet. The student was about to go out to walk in the garden of the Tuileries until the hour when he could venture to appear in me, de Beausant's drawing room. That walk was a turning point in Eugene's career. Several women noticed him. He looked so handsome, so young, and so well dressed. This almost admiring attention gave a new turn to his thoughts. He forgot his sisters and the aunt who had robbed herself for him. He no longer remembered his own virtuous scruples. He had seen hovering above his head the fiend so easy to mistake for an angel, the devil with rainbow wings, who scatters rubies and aims his golden shafts at palace fronts, who invests women with purple and thrones with a glory that dazzles the eyes of fools till they forget the simple origins of royal dominion. He had heard the rustle of that vanity whose tinsel seems to us to be the symbol of power. However cynical Vautrin's words had been, they had made an impression on his mind, as the sordid features of the old crone who whispers, a lover, and gold in torrents remain engraven on a young girl's memory. Eugene lounged about the walks till it was nearly 5 o'clock, then he went to meet de Beausset, and received one of the terrible blows against which young hearts are defenseless. Hitherto the Vicomtesse had received him with the kindly urbanity, the bland grace of manner that is the result of fine breeding, but is only complete when it comes from the heart. Today de Beausset bowed constrainedly, and spoke curtly. Dear Rastignac, I cannot possibly see you, at least not at this moment. I am engaged. An observer, and Rastignac instantly became an observer, could read the whole history, the character and customs of caste, in the phrase, in the tones of her voice, in her glance and bearing. He caught a glimpse of the iron hand beneath the velvet glove, the personality, the egoism beneath the manner, the wood beneath the varnish. In short, he heard that unmistakable I, the king that issues from the plumed canopy of the throne, and finds its last echo under the crest of the simplest gentleman. Eugene had trusted too implicitly to the generosity of a woman. He could not believe in her haughtiness. Like all the unfortunate, he had subscribed, in all good faith, the generous compact which should bind the benefactor to the recipient, and the first article in that bond, between two large-hearted natures, is a perfect equality. The kindness which knits two souls together is as rare, as divine, and as little understood as the passion of love, for both love and kindness are the lavish generosity of noble natures. Rastignac was set upon going to the Duchess de Carigliano's ball, so he swallowed down this rebuff. Madam, he faltered out, I would not have come to trouble you about a trifling matter. Be so kind as to permit me to see you later, I can wait. Very well, come and dine with me, she said, a little confused by the harsh way in which she had spoken, for this lady was as genuinely kind-hearted as she was high-born. Eugene was touched by this sudden relenting, but nonetheless he said to himself as he went away, crawl in the dust, put up with every kind of treatment. What must the rest of the world be like when one of the kindest of women forgets all her promises of befriending me in a moment, and tosses me aside like an old shoe? So it is every one for himself. It is true that her house is not a shop, and I have put myself in the wrong by needing her help. You should cut your way through the world like a cannonball, as Vautrin said. But the student's bitter thoughts were soon dissipated by the pleasure which he promised himself in this dinner with the Vicomtesse. Fate seemed to determine that the smallest accidents in his life should combine to urge him into a career, which the terrible Sphinx of the Maison-Vauquer had described as a field of battle where you must either slay or be slain, and cheat to avoid being cheated. You leave your conscience and your heart at the barriers, and wear a mask on entering into this game of grim earnest, where, as in ancient Sparta, you must snatch your prize without being detected if you would deserve the crown. On his return he found the Vicomtesse gracious and kindly, as she had always been to him. They went together to the dining room, where the Vicomte was waiting for his wife. In the time of the Restoration the luxury of the table was carried, as is well known, to the highest degree, and de Beausset, like many jaded men of the world, had few pleasures left but those of good cheer. In this matter, in fact, he was a gourmand of the schools of Louis V and of the Duc d'Escars, and luxury was supplemented by splendor. Eugene, dining for the first time in a house where the traditions of grandeur had descended through many generations, had never seen any spectacle like this that now met his eyes. In the time of the Empire, balls had always ended with a supper, because the officers who took part in them must be fortified for immediate service, and even in Paris might be called upon to leave the ballroom for the battlefield. This arrangement had gone out of fashion under the monarchy, and Eugene had so far only been asked to dances. The self-possession which preeminently distinguished him in later life already stood him in good stead, and he did not betray his amazement. Yet as he saw for the first time the finely wrought silver plate, the completeness of every detail, the sumptuous dinner, noiselessly served, it was difficult for such an ardent imagination not to prefer this life of studied and refined luxury to the hardships of the life which he had chosen only that morning. His thoughts went back for a moment to the lodging house, and with a feeling of profound loathing, he vowed to himself that at New Year he would go. Prompted at least as much by a desire to live among cleaner surroundings as by a wish to shake off Vautrin, whose huge hand he seemed to feel on his shoulder at that moment. When you consider the numberless forms, clamorous or mute, that corruption takes in Paris, common sense begins to wonder what mental aberration prompted the state to establish great colleges and schools there, and assemble young men in the capital. How it is that pretty women are respected, or that the gold coin displayed in the money chainer's wooden saucers does not take to itself wings in the twinkling of an eye. And when you come to think further how comparatively few cases of crime there are, and to count up the misdemeanors committed by youth, is there not a certain amount of respect due to these patient Tantaliuses who wrestle with themselves and nearly always come off victorious? The struggles of the poor student in Paris, if skillfully drawn, would furnish a most dramatic picture of modern civilization. In vain de Beaucent looked at Eugene as if asking him to speak. The student was tongue-tied in the Vicomte's presence. "Are you going to take me to the Italians this evening?" the Vicomtesse asked her husband. "You cannot doubt that I should obey you with pleasure," he answered, and there was a sarcastic tinge in his politeness which Eugene did not detect. "But I ought to go to meet someone at the Varites," his mistress said she to herself. "Then, is not a Judah coming for you this evening?" inquired the Vicomte. "No," she answered, petulantly. "Very well, then, if you really must have an arm, take that of de Rastignac." The Vicomtesse turned to Eugene with a smile. "That would be a very compromising step for you," she said. "A Frenchman loves danger, because in danger there is glory, to quote de Chateaubriand," said Rastignac with a bow. A few moments later he was sitting beside de Beaucent in a brougham that whirled them through the streets of Paris to a fashionable theatre. It seemed to him that some fairy magic had suddenly transported him into a box facing the stage. All the lorgnettes of the house were pointed at him as he entered, and at the Vicomtesse in her charming toilette. He went from enchantment to enchantment. "You must talk to me, you know," said de Beaucent. "Oh, look, there is de Nucingen in the third box from ours. Her sister and de Trails are on the other side." The Vicomtesse glanced as she spoke at the box where de Roquefide should have been. De Ajuda was not there, and de Beaucent's face lighted up in a marvelous way. "She is charming," said Eugene, after looking at de Nucingen. "She has white eyelashes." "Yes, but she has such a pretty slender figure. Her hands are large." "Such beautiful eyes." "Her face is long." "Yes, but length gives distinction." "It is lucky for her that she has some distinction in her face. Just see how she fidgets with her opera glass." "The Goriot blood shows itself in every movement," said the Vicomtesse, much to Eugene's astonishment. Indeed, de Beaucent seemed to be engaged in making a survey of the house, and to be unconscious of Nucingen's existence. But no movement made by the latter was lost upon the Vicomtesse. The house was full of the loveliest women in Paris, so that Delphine de Nucingen was not a little flattered to receive the undivided attention of de Beaucent's young, handsome, and well-dressed cousin, who seemed to have no eyes for anyone else. "If you look at her so persistently, you will make people talk, de Rastignac. You will never succeed if you fling yourself at anyone's head like that." "My dear cousin," said Eugene, "you have protected me indeed so far, and now if you would complete your work, I only ask of you a favor which will cost you but little, and be of very great service to me. I have lost my heart already." "Yes, and to that woman. How could I aspire to find anyone else to listen to me?" he asked, with a keen glance at his cousin. "Her Grace the Duchess de Carigliano is a friend of the Duchess de Berry," he went on, after a pause. "You are sure to see her. Will you be so kind as to present me to her, and to take me to her ball on Monday? I shall meet de Nucingen there, and enter into my first skirmish." "Willingly," she said. "If you have a liking for her already, your affairs of the heart are like to prosper. That is de Mars over there in the Princess Golothian's box. De Nucingen is racked with jealousy. There is no better time for approaching a woman, especially if she happens to be a banker's wife. All those ladies of the Chaussee d'Antin love revenge. Then, what would you do yourself in such a case?" "I should suffer in silence." At this point the Marquis de Ajuda appeared in de Beaucent's box. "I have made a muddle of my affairs to come to you," he said, "and I am telling you about it, so that it may not be a sacrifice." Eugene saw the glow of joy on the Vicomtesse's face, and knew that this was love, and learned the difference between love and the affectations of Parisian coquetry. He admired his cousin, grew mute, and yielded his place to de Ajuda with a sigh. "How noble, how sublime a woman is when she loves like that," he said to himself. "And he could forsake her for a doll. Oh, how could anyone forsake her?" There was a boy's passionate indignation in his heart. He could have flung himself at de Beaucent's feet. He longed for the power of the devil if he could snatch her away and hide her in his heart, as an eagle snatches up some white youngling from the plains and bears it to its eyrie. It was humiliating to him to think that in all this gallery of fair pictures he had not one picture of his own. To have a mistress and an almost royal position is a sign of power, he said to himself. And he looked at de Nucingen as a man measures another who has insulted him. The Vicomtesse turned to him, and the expression of her eyes thanked him 1,000 times for his discretion. The first act came to an end just then. "Do you know me, de Nucingen, well enough to present de Rastignac to her?" she asked of the Marquis de Ajuda. "She will be delighted," said the Marquis. The handsome Portuguese rose as he spoke and took the student's arm, and in another moment Eugene found himself in me, de Nucingen's box. "Madam," said the Marquis, "I have the honor of presenting to you the Chevalier Eugene de Rastignac. He is a cousin of me, de Beausance. You have made so deep an impression upon him, that I thought I would fill up the measure of his happiness by bringing him nearer to his divinity.